Well, good afternoon and welcome to another series of webinars coming to you from CMAT, also Hanover Fairs. And basically, we are running a series of webinars every week, talking to senior leaders in supply chain about the impacts of COVID-19 on the supply chain. And today we are very lucky to have Abdul Jaafar with us, who is GM Supply Chain from Fantastic Furniture. So Abdul, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
Oh, it's a pleasure, and thank you so much for giving up your time to join us today. We're very lucky on this series that we get to talk to lots of different people about what's going on in the supply chain and lots of different perspectives. So let's just launch into it. From your perspective, and you were just saying that you're working at home and at work, and you're sort of, rostering like that. How are you seeing things in the supply chain in Australia?
Well, we've definitely seen what capable supply chains we have in Australia, and obviously the ones that haven't been so lucky to have matured as rapidly as others. We've seen companies that were able to react very quickly, and hence continue to drive forward with fulfilling customer orders. I've never seen anything like this, to be honest with you, and I've been in supply chain for a very long time, coming on 20 years, and it's very, very different. I can tell you that right now. People are looking and scrambling as best they can to just try and understand what they need to do to react, whether it's demand, whether it's supply, whether it's fulfillment to the end consumer. It's rapidly changing. I can tell you right now firsthand, we are having different conversations every day. So.
I bet. And are you finding you're having to work much longer shifts, and is there a lot of expediting going on and firefighting, or have things settled down a bit now?
It's interesting. We started with team segregation. So basically, we had the whole supply chain team split into two, and the operational team at the DC on the floor continued to work through as well in team segregation. Now we definitely haven't seen it settle down yet. We're feeling ripple effects of Malaysia being closed down, Vietnam have closed down, and consequently turned back on. China had their Chinese New Year, so we prepped for Chinese New Year. Didn't know it was going to go for that long, so definitely it's taught us a lot about what we need to do differently moving forward. And reset different requirements in our business, absolutely.
So I think I've been talking to a number of people, in different industries over the last week or two, and I'm just trying to get a sense of whether we're over the hump in terms of supply chain issues. And do you think we're seeing maybe a period of stability now where we can kind of consolidate and make sure we're still maintaining service and cost and so on?
I suppose it depends where you're buying your product from. That will determine the length of disruption for your business. I know that as a business, we're drawn to China. We buy a lot of product from China. China's seen the knock-on effect of it that they've done now around the world. The pandemic basically has caused people to withdraw orders, cancel orders, etc., and it's halted a lot of the manufacturing industry in China. So I don't know if we're over the hump yet, but we're certainly getting towards that. We're seeing our orders starting to be fulfilled on a more normal basis from China. But then obviously what I said earlier with Malaysia, that's a problem in itself, and also Vietnam. But as far as locally, we definitely haven't seen stability yet. But what it has taught us, and it's a very important point, was the cost of doing business, and such a important point in the business, and your lens continue to be focused on cost of doing business now more than ever. And I think once we come out of the back of this, we'll definitely have our cost of doing business reset. Much like most businesses, they will really understand what they need to keep going day to day, and what's a requirement, what's essential, basically, like the buzzword of today, and what isn't essential out of all of this. Absolutely.
Okay. And so many industries have, I guess, switched a lot more to online and home delivery and so on. Are you finding that as well?
Absolutely, yeah. So we've seen that in our own business. We've seen that in a lot of businesses. What I really love about Australia is how you've seen so many businesses react to having to close their stores. Kmart, a classic example. They're now looking at a few stores where they're actually fulfilment centres like mini DCs. While they aren't open for trade, they are operating as a warehouse.
Mm,
And I think that tells a lot about who we are, the ability of us to be able to react to different situations, and continue to fulfill the customer demand. Surprisingly, while people haven't been able to travel for holidays, etc., etc., it looks like they've been still looking for ways to spend their money. And why not? When you can't go on holidays, do a bit of DIY at home. Look for those sorts of things. So definitely haven't seen a lull in demand from customers, and we need to be able to fulfill. And consequently, we've seen an increase in
mm.
going out either direct to customer or into our stores.
I suppose one of the questions that's sort of doing the rounds of supply chain circles at the moment is how will customer behavior change as a result of this? So,
Yeah,
what do they say? It takes 4 weeks to create a new habit. We've all now got a habit of ordering a lot more online,
yeah.
maybe ordering in different sized orders. Do you think we're going to see some of that come through the other end where basically our market demand patterns will have changed?
Absolutely, and those products that customers normally wouldn't buy online, be your mattresses, be it your lounges, etc., etc. I think that is a telltale sign of what's happening right now. Customers are
Mm,
buying mattresses and lounges online. They are shifting from the traditional way of purchasing, and that'll continue to happen. I think there'll be more of that. What I do like is some companies out there doing the virtual tour, showing customers products online and giving them the whole treatment that they would have received in store online. And it's funny how when we're forced to do something, we change our behaviours, and I think we're seeing that now, and we'll definitely see that into the future. I also think customers are recognising what's important, and that's trickling through our industry as well. You're seeing it firsthand, other than the panic buying stuff that we saw at the start, which still confuses me today.
yeah, I don't think we'll ever work that one out.
No.
I'm not sure whether you noticed we've had a poll come up on the screen. So
Yes.
there's a couple of questions on the way through. So if you're watching this, maybe you want to just have a vote on those polls. So this one is post COVID-19. Will you buy more of your products online? Let's see what results we get from that poll. And also,
Absolutely.
as we're going through here, for those watching, do post your questions as we're going into the chat box, and we'll try and answer those as we're going through. And of course, we'll try and answer some at the end.
Yep.
So another big question, of course, doing the rounds is what's going to be our sourcing policies going forward. And a couple of weeks ago, I was saying to people that, well, maybe China's a little bit on the nose, and maybe our consumers will demand, products from elsewhere. That sort of groundswell seems to be getting a bit more serious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think it's going to be sufficient that companies, and I'm not asking for a perspective here from Fantastic Furniture.
Yeah.
This is your opinion.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Do you think there's going to be quite a significant push for companies to really reconsider their sourcing strategies?
Look, I think
Either
if
political push or
yeah,
maybe market push.
I think if you don't reassess how you buy product and where you buy product from post this, then you'll definitely have a lot to answer for. I definitely
Mm,
need to open your lens a little bit more to have a look at what's going on in other countries. Look at Vietnam, for example, how much they've matured over the years. We saw a natural shift into Vietnam. Malaysia, for example, Indonesia. So yeah, you would definitely have to reset and look at your sourcing strategy. I definitely we've seen that, and I've seen that a lot. But we need to also bear in mind the shipping line, the shipping industry. That they seem to be the forgotten parties in all of this, and how much they've been hurt in the process of everything that's going on. There's been circa 35% drop in demand on shipping lines in the last 4, 5, 6 weeks. Consequently, more blank sailings. That needs to play into your sourcing strategy too. It's not just where do I buy from, it's how does that product come to me, and what am I doing with that product? And then obviously the next step in that question is, what can I produce locally, and how can I produce what I need locally, and how can I make it viable? There's questions in that we as a business will need to continue to look at. We obviously produce a lot of our own, so we are very big advocates of buy locally.
Yep.
We produce our own mattresses and lounges locally for a big part of what we do, which is important for us as a business, as an Australian business. But you definitely need to look at that as a company moving forward. And your sourcing strategy would need to be reset post COVID-19 for sure.
Absolutely. So great plug, fantastic furniture, sourcing locally with your sofas and lounges. I see
my choice up to 100 fabrics.
Yeah, there you go. Where do we order? So just some results from our poll there. So 84% of people are saying that they're probably going to be buying more online. Well,
wow, yeah.
You better be able to be delivering those mattresses. So, and again, just from a personal perspective, one of the things that must have been happening with most businesses over the last few weeks is a significant increase in costs. And where are you seeing the major cost increases, around other businesses?
So the things I'm hearing now, and I have been hearing for the last 4 to 6 weeks, is the storage, the 3PL activity locally in Australia. They had containers sailing towards them, and they weren't allowed to operate. They had to close their doors. The bottlenecks at the wharfs, Origin. Obviously, that's a big hurt point at Origin. There was a lot of congestion happening at one go 2 weeks back when the port started to open again. Being able to get all the containers that I already had planned, and for other businesses, definitely heard a lot of that, as well as your local disruption. And with the influx of demand comes an influx of if you're prepared for it or not. Like if you look at Coles and Woolies having to put so many more people on to keep up with demand, I don't think everyone had that luxury. And that spike. And it's funny because you could easily go with the old way of working and throw labour at the problem, but is that the right way, and is that the right way forward? So I think there's definitely been a big throwing of things to resolve a problem, be it transport, shipping, and labour. And people have had to do what they've had to do to either one, clear their containers, get them into Australia to be able to deliver them to the customer, or just handle the volumes that they currently have within business. And I don't think anyone would have been prepared for this.
No, absolutely. Now, I know from our previous discussions and chatting at events and so on, you're a man who likes to track the numbers. You like to track the metrics. What are some of the things that you'll be looking for, do you think, in the coming months to kind of assess what's happened, what's the impact been, what might we do in the future?
Yeah, I think your cost per cubic meter remains a staple locally. Importing a container, all encompassing. So, the origin fees, the shipping line fees, all the way through to the wharf cartage into Australia. One of my key points continues and remains to be inventory. How much stock is in stores of the right stock, and how much of that is sailing towards us to be able to turn it over. Traditional stock turns in inventory, and just that whole snapshot will remain obviously important. And a lot of the things I look at are not only cost-based, but also, ensuring the product is there for the customer, and lead times. Lead times is, you naturally have complacency at Origin post all of this, because they have a level of, now we're only restarting, so you need to just understand that it's going to get that product out to you. And, again, going back to that, you see the costs build up at Origin all the way through to destination. And if it's not managed properly, and I don't mean post-mortem discussions at the end of month, or we're looking at our metrics daily, and we look at our costs daily as well. It's so important in what we do that, there's certain triggers that we continue to focus on to make sure that, what we're doing is right, and what we're doing is yielding what we want it to do at the end, which is the customer.
Absolutely. I mean, that's an interesting point you raised, looking at your metrics daily. A lot of people I've been speaking to recently who are very into sales and operations planning or integrated business planning, whatever you want to call it. You know, and we're used to that monthly cycle of planning. A lot of them we've urged now to do almost that whole process weekly.
Yeah.
Have you formally sort of condensed that whole planning process at all?
Yeah, it's definitely not monthly.
No.
If the inventory team were on this call,
Yeah.
they'd say they don't stop receiving phone calls. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's compressed, and it's a daily discussion between all of us, the buying and the inventory team. It's such an important focus, because what's important for customers today isn't going to be what's important for customers tomorrow.
Mm.
And trying to get a little bit of an indication to look as far forward as you can plays a significant part in what you buy. And I think, you know, had we known hand sanitizers were going to be so important 6 months ago, I'm sure we all would have had a garage full of hand sanitizer.
Mm.
So it's important to not only look at what's happening now, but try and, you know, get close and be curious with the customer to try and understand what could tomorrow look like. They are very frequent discussions, and, you know, anyone that's still doing traditional monthly meetings, they would definitely be feeling it now, because it's one day is already, you know, one day to the next is very different. Can you imagine what 1 month looks like?
Absolutely. I mean, that might be something that continues forward, perhaps, and our whole planning cycles become a lot more flexible.
Yeah, and I think that's the piece, right? So a lot of what's happening now is there's so much learnings, so many learnings for all of us into the future, that we're going to take a lot of this and say, okay, now this is the new benchmark, and what we measure today, is it really important tomorrow? And how we do things today, is it really important for tomorrow? And yeah, that's going to continue to be a focus for everybody, I'm sure.
So looking to the future, and you know, if you had a big bag of money or the ability to change whatever, what would be a couple of things that you would change in your supply chain or a supply chain based on the experience of the last couple of months? What do you think we need to change?
For me, I'm very comfortable where we are as a supply chain. We've matured quite nicely. What's important for me is to get closer to, and we have been fortunate to do so, but staying close to your partners, and it's not just your suppliers. I mean your business partners overall. Creating that level of transparency that, you know, you can understand what they are currently going through. And if you see Origin, you cannot just switch on a factory with 2,000 or 3,000 people and say, okay, start working again. I think if I had a big bag of money, my investment will continue to be in inventory and systems alike. So, you know, at Origin, buying the product and having it ready to go, and at destination, the systems that allow you to be as agile as, you know, some companies are fortunate to be, and some companies aren't fortunate to be. It's not as easy to just say, all right, tomorrow we're going to switch on this new process. There's a lot of testing and different things that have to go in play before you can just say, we're turning on this new initiative tomorrow. But yeah, definitely staying close to your partners and investing in the product that you need, and the systems that you need. I know for a fact that, you know, out of this will come, there'll be people knocking on the doors of people like Demand Solutions and other people like that wanting to buy an inventory system and working off Microsoft Excel spreadsheets. That's going to be a single game changer for all supply chains. I think people have underestimated the importance of a planning tool and the right planning and inventory team, and the focus being there. You know, it's only until you have a month or two of non-supply when you realize, wow, what could we have done differently if this happened all over again?
No, that's true. I mean, around the industry here in Australia, and in fact globally, there's a bit of a hold, obviously, on some of the major supply chain projects that are traditionally underway. People maybe are waiting to see what happens before they invest heavily in technology or new facilities or automation. Do you think, you know, in a year's time, we'll have a different perspective on what we're going to spend money on? Will we be chasing automation and technology as much, or would we be looking for more flexibility where we can just throw people at things?
Yeah, well, I think my question back to you and anyone else would be, what value is in that automation, and is it as valuable? Would it have done anything different to you as a business right now. So, i.e., an automatic sortation device. You hadn't had one before. You now want one. What would that have done if you didn't have any stock anyway? That's one question. You know, the tools, what you want to buy to your demand planning tool, for example. Were you mature enough as a business to implement it? I think your priorities as a business should remain true if they are genuine priorities, and that is important to recognize, whether it's a system, it's a process, or it's a tool itself. And you know, I think if it was a priority for you as a business before, and it isn't a priority now, that's the question you really need to ask yourself, whether it was a priority. Because for us as a business, you know, we would definitely question ourselves tenfold if we started to see a shift in priorities, or we were moving away from who we are as a business. And I think that should remain true for any business. So if it's automation, what would automation have done if it was a sortation device at distribution center, if you didn't have the stock? Yeah, I suppose they're the questions you need to ask yourself before you reassess.
Yeah, okay. And just on the topic of questions, for those watching, if you have any questions, do type them into the chat box. We will have time to get through all of those. And I think, Daniel, you've probably got another poll to go up shortly. Just looking at the whole sort of supply chain industry, just move that out of the way. Looking at the whole supply chain industry, and it's interesting how our perception of different professions has changed now, and it's wonderful to see the support that healthcare workers are getting, and you know, that's so deserved. Everybody's now talking about supply chain, and how does the toilet tissue actually get here? Why do we run out of rice? Everybody wants to know how a supply chain works. Do you think this is going to change the perception, the interest, the eagerness of people to get into the industry?
I would be very surprised if people don't start to think about or recognize supply chain as their most important piece of their business. You know, having spent so many years in this industry, it was first logistics. It was that transport guy over there. It's that, go speak to him. He's the one that looks after the trucks and the people in the warehouse. But you know, you're genuine people that recognise the importance of supply chain. Yeah, it is a foundational piece for any business. Even if you have a look at what Scott Morrison is doing now, hiring Michael Byrne from Toll to take on this this supply chain piece for Australia, to get that importing piece happening again and exporting. I think we've all started to reset ourselves and what supply chain means to a business. And you definitely, I would love to see an increase of people wanting to join the industry, because it is such an important piece for any business. And it's not just how the product gets here, but it's understanding the quality aspect, that origin, all the way through to delivering it to the end consumer, and all the intricacies in between all of that. I think it's a staple for any business, and it should be seen that way for everybody. Absolutely.
Yeah, good. I mean, looking at the people question for a moment. Oh, here's our poll results coming in. Let's have a look at those. So will you take more notice in the future of where products are made? 50% are saying yes. 32% saying I was already very conscious. That's good. So
that's good.
Getting your mattresses from Fantastic Furniture because they're made in Australia. Yeah, very good. But yeah, as expected, quite a shift there, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Looking at the sort of staff element for a moment, again, either looking at your own business or businesses that you're working with, what have been some of the really essential or maybe even surprising talents that you've seen sort of come to the surface over the last few weeks?
Yeah, okay, good question. So I think I'll go back to the inventory component. The inventory planning aspect of the business and the people in that team have surfaced, for me especially, and I'm sure other businesses. The whole project piece, I think that remains a very crucial piece in all of this, because not only are they agile enough to take on new projects, but they can also tweak current projects that we have in the pipeline to say, okay, we can't do it to the full extent right now, but how may we tweak it to be able to shift or fulfill the customer requirement. And the analytical piece remained, and that surfaced a lot. And the ocean freight piece, I'd say for me, yeah, the ocean freight piece remains and is very important. So notwithstanding the people element as well, I think there's a big role to play in finding the right specialist business partner for supply chain that can help navigate through these difficult times. So if I had 4 or 5 key elements that I would say, you know, what's really had to or shine throughout this whole thing, I think it's the inventory, the project, the people, and the ocean freight for sure.
Okay, good. Maybe if we flip that on its head for a minute, and without pointing fingers at people, what kind of surprised you? Like, oh crap, you know, I thought we had those skills, or I thought we would have been better at, or not necessarily in your business, but
Yeah,
you know what you're seeing around you. Because it's
still,
bound to show some cracks, isn't it?
well, I think the transport industry as a whole is definitely one that, if you look back several years ago, a lot of people started to import goods. The local drivers there was a whole lot of drivers selling their trucks, and you know, losing jobs because the driving piece wasn't there. And then you have this pandemic, and all of a sudden the requirement for truck drivers has gone through the roof. You know, I think we took for granted our truck drivers before, and I think they're such an important piece that we're now bending the rules to let them work weird and wonderful hours like they used to do before. I think the transport piece for me, you know, I thought Australia was always great at it, but we lost our way a few years ago. And I think now it's symbolic of, you know, the gap that we've had in Australia for a few years. It's definitely come through here. You look at Woolworths, you look at Coles, you look at Australia Post, you look at Toll, the shortage of drivers, and they've had to go and outsource so much work to be able to keep up with the demand. Well, they need to remember that when the demand slows down, because it's so important to what they do, even us. Such an important piece of what we do.
As we're just sort of drawing to a close, I just urge anyone watching, if you have any questions, get them into the chat box now, and we will be able to answer them. Just sort of reflecting on this conversation then, and over the last few weeks, Abdul, if someone said to you, what's 3 key lessons that you've learned in the last 6 weeks that you know you won't forget, it's going to carry you forward, and you're going to be talking about it for years? What would be those 3 big lessons?
I think it's the business recognizing the importance of supply chain, absolutely, and the seat at the table that it has to have when making decisions. The inventory, the forward projection, how you buy product, where you buy product, and the way in which you buy product. So that whole sourcing piece, but not only the sourcing piece, it's the behavioral piece to get you to be able to purchase that product. So the right systems and tools in that piece, and people. I think we are sometimes we take for granted the people at our disposal, and you know, I think without the people in our business, we would never have been able to, you know, navigate our way through these difficult times. And you know, not only that, people need direction, so you need to know where you're going as well. So not only is it the people, but it's the people with direction sprinkled on top of that, because if you don't know where you're going, then it's very hard to try and take a whole group of people with you as well.
That's a great summary. Thank you very much. So we'll just draw to a close there. Abdul Jaafar, GM Supply Chain at Fantastic Furniture. Thank you very much for taking out a little bit of time from your extremely busy day and sharing your thoughts. I know that you're very passionate about the industry, and you love to share ideas and thoughts, and you've really done that today. So, and thank you for Hanover Fairs via the CMAT event for putting this on today. And I know every time we meet up and we talk at events, I always say, oh, connect on LinkedIn. And I'm sure you won't mind, Abdul, if people do that, if people are watching.
No, of course not.
By all means, do connect to Abdul, do connect to me as well, Rob O'Byrne from Logistics Bureau on LinkedIn. We both love to share information and so on. Now, just before we leave, we just have a little advert for next week, because we've got 2 webinars next week apparently. So on Tuesday the 28th at 8:30 a.m. we have Saul Resnick, CEO of DHL. I'm sure he'll have some fascinating insights into what's been happening. And on Thursday we've managed to secure at 4 p.m. Peter Birtles, and I'm sure a lot of people will know that name. Peter was CEO of Super Cheap Retail Group, and he's now a very high profile director in a number of retail organizations. So a couple of great sessions to look forward to next week. But this one, thanks to Abdul, was an awesome session. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you everybody for watching. We'll see you next
Thanks,
week.
Rob. Thank you.